Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm BaddestFish80 and today it's patch news again for Minion Masters. Now let's dive in and find out what we're going to see. Okay, so we are in the Kaboom Kingdom expansion. Remember, expansions are for 3 months. This is the 3rd month of the expansion. So this is going to be the final patch of the Kaboom Kingdom expansion. What are we going to have? Well, as we've seen recently, the patches have had names. This one is going to be called the Slithery Sacrifices, and this is going to be version 1.39. Okay, so this is going to be dropping Thursday the 1st of September. We're going to have 2 new cards, a new skin, the new AFK and Disconnection Bot. We're going to have balance changes as always and a bunch of bug fixes. So let's find out what we're going to have. So, new cards we'll cover first. So there's going to be 2 new cards, as we always have. The first of the new cards is going to be called the Idol of Sacrifice. Now let's have a little bit of a delve into this chap. So Idol of Sacrifice, this is a 5 mana slither building. Okay, so seems confusing. It's a statue. Looks like a living statue. It's a building. It's got the same stats as a living statue, but let's have a look at its trick up its sleeve. So this is spawned as a building. When you perform a sacrifice, this becomes a minion. And when it becomes a minion, it gains rage and it heals itself for 250. So remember, when it's a building, it has the normal health degradation that a building will have. So I think if you use this within 10 seconds, if it's activated within 10 seconds, then it will be full HP. So the idea of this is you have it in a slither deck. When you sacrifice something, so there's a number of cards with sacrifice mechanics, like for example the Rabid Prowler. When you activate a sacrifice, you will also get the Idol of Sacrifice activated. So you can get a lot of value out of the sacrifice mechanic. It does make your hand or the way that you're playing the cards a little bit more awkward because you've got some more setup to do. And of course, if you play the Idol of Sacrifice and then things don't go quite right, then it's just going to sit there degrading. Okay, so that's the Idol of Sacrifice. Starts as a building. When you sacrifice something, boom, it becomes a raged statue. And this is what it looks like. So you can differentiate it from the regular living statue. So that's the first of the new cards. The second new card is Taluk the Vessel. So this guy is basically a slitherbound, but he's a special slitherbound. So he's a 3 mana slither minion, so 200 HP, does 60 damage, 30 DPS, but he has a few special things. Firstly, he deals double damage to minions that are poisoned or stunned. So if you've got this in a deck with lots of poison mechanics, he can do a lot of DPS. So he's doing 120 damage every 2 seconds, 60 DPS to things that are poisoned or stunned. So you could potentially find this in a Zenchi deck that has a lot of stun mechanics, or some slither decks with a lot of poison mechanics. So he also, because he is a slitherbound as such, he does count as a slitherbound when you try to sacrifice something. So remember the little slitherbound guys, that you can sacrifice them for various cards and mechanics. This guy will count as a slitherbound, but he will not die when sacrificed. So you can sacrifice him, but he will not go anywhere. So that's an interesting little thing. So we've got the 2 new cards, both kind of built around the sacrifice mechanic. And this is what he looks like in the game. So he's pretty small, remember, he's just a slitherbound. But he is graphically different. You can tell him different from regular slitherbounds. Of course, he's got a lot more HP and does a lot more damage. So it'll be interesting to see how people utilize both of these new cards and see what kind of decks that they will find themselves within. And as always, we have a brand new skin. This is a skin for Morelia. Now this is the Poltergeist Morelia skin. Be very interesting to see what this looks like in the game on the tower, but that's a cool looking skin, a legendary skin for Morelia. And of course the skin, as always, will be available through the premium battle pass. Okay, so what else do we have in this patch? So we've got the AFK bot. If you remember a patch or two, or maybe the last patch, I think, the AFK bot was introduced, where if you burnt a certain amount of mana, it would take over for you. Now, there were a few things that weren't quite right with the implementation of it. So that was removed, and then it was added back into a beta build where you could test it, but it's back and it's better. So remember, just to clarify, this is the same as what happened before. So a player will be replaced by a bot if they are AFK until they return. Remember, if you go AFK and you're replaced by a bot, you get a little pop-up on your screen and you can click it when you're back, and then you can resume playing. So previously this would kick in after 3 burnt mana, which wasn't quite the right threshold. So the threshold has been adjusted. So the system will determine you as AFK if at the start of the match you burn 4 consecutive mana. So remember, mana burning is when you get to a full mana bar and then the mana keeps ticking, but there's nowhere on the bar for it to go, so it just gets wasted. Also can be referred to as flooding. So at the start of the match, AFK is 4 consecutive mana burn. At perk 1, it's 5, perk 2, it's 6, perk 3, it's 7, and at Mana Frenzy, it's 10. So the longer the game goes on, the bigger the threshold of mana needing to be burnt is, and that's really just to counteract the fact that mana speeds up as the game goes on. Now, remember, there is a setting within the general settings, I think, where you can enable or disable this functionality. So if you don't want it, you can turn it off. Now, the interesting thing is you can even enable it or disable it during a match. So if you've got it disabled and then suddenly your doorbell rings, oh, quick, get in there, turn the AFK bot on. And the cool thing is that it actually counts the mana that you've burned even before you've turned the AFK bot on. So if you've burnt a bunch of mana trying to scrabble into the settings and find where the setting is, once you've got it enabled, anything you've burnt up to that point, and if you're up to the threshold, it will take into account and the AFK bot will jump in immediately. So the AFK bot is something we've seen before, but it's back and it's better. But the new thing is the Disconnect Bot. So similar to the AFK bot, but there's no threshold. The threshold is, does the player get disconnected? So if a player gets disconnected for whatever reason, they will be immediately replaced by a bot, and of course when they return, then they will regain their control. So just to clarify, the AFK bot is back, but it's better than it was before, got a better threshold, more control, and now there's a disconnect bot. So if people disconnect, whether that's a disconnect through their internet connection dropping out, rage quitting, whatever, they will be covered. So hopefully that will improve people's experience, because I know a lot of people get frustrated with people griefing. Right, balance. Now, as always, we have a bunch of balance changes. Now, the balance will look at buffs, rebalances where things are changed in multiple ways or quite dramatically, and nerfs. So first of all, we're going to look at the buffs, and the first buff we're going to cover is a buff to Morelia. And this will make a bit more sense a little bit later when we look at one of the nerfs. So Morelia is having a slight increase in the number of skeletons she gets from her spellbook. So at perk 1 you get 4 instead of 3, perk 2 you get 8 instead of 6. Interestingly, this is the opposite to what happened back in patch 1.14 in June of 2020, where the number of skeletons were reduced. So that's been undone here, and we're back to what she was back in the day. Now we have a change to the disruptor path. So remember, the disruptor path will get to a bridge, and then after a small period of time it will jump to the other bridge. Now the previous purpose of it was just to take the bridges, or put pressure on the bridges, but now it has an additional functionality. When it arrives at a bridge, it will stun whatever's there for 2 seconds. So living up to its name as the disruptor path. So hopefully we'll see some more disruptor path usage there, and we see we get some more value out of that little guy. Now, a buff to Poison Strike. So remember, Poison Strike is the spell that does a lot of poison. And relatively recently, it was given the sacrifice mechanic, where if you sacrifice 2 Slitherbounds, you double. Now you double the poison. Previously, you got an extra 4 seconds of poison. Now it doubles that. Now, effectively what that's doing is increasing the poison from 4 seconds to 6.5 seconds as the extra sacrificed. So previously it would do 130 damage to start with, or if you activated it with the sacrifice, 210 damage. Now the sacrificed version will do 260 damage. So again, a reminder, the sacrifice is sacrificing the little slither bounds, including Taluk, one of the new cards, if you've got that involved. Now, of course, when we look at cards, spells, minions doing more damage, we always like to look at the thresholds of what they can and can't kill anymore. And that's very, very important when it comes to spells. So now the activated version of this spell can kill a lot more than what it could previously. So we'll just quickly go through the list of those. So it can now kill an Arcane Golem if it hasn't been buffed at all. That's Milloween's Golem. An ATG Drone, Bannerman, Elite Swarmer, Harbinger, Herald Moon, High Inquisitor Ardera, Morgul the Swarmer King, and Morgul's Ragers. So there's some real key units in there, things like the Harbinger and the Herald Moon, that can be difficult to deal with. Suddenly now Poison Strike does have the power, when it is powered up with the sacrifice mechanic, to start killing these things. So we could see Poison Strike coming back. And remember, the way poison works is it ticks on a regular basis, so it is great at ticking through shields and things like that. Right, now we have a buff to Rimagal. We've seen Rimagal getting quite a few buffs recently, trying to get it into a position where people are happy to use it. Remember, Rimagal comes with a big drawback that you've got to defrost it. You've got to spend 35 mana on minions, and all of your minions will start frozen until you've defrosted it. It now has, or from the last patch, it now has true damage, and it's now getting a damage increase. So the damage is going up from 420 to 460. So it's received quite a few buffs recently. We'll see if this one is the one that pushes it into the limelight. So it's doing a lot of damage now. Remember, it does have the big drawback that it can't hit air, but you can support that and work around it. The breath threshold now, the 460, means it can now kill a Defenso Chopper, Avea, and Zip Zapinator in one full breath. So potentially being able to remove more is going to be a nice buff there for Rimagal. Here we have a change to werewolves. So these are werewolves wherever you get them from. So the health of a werewolf is now going up from 400 to 450. So this is going to buff Once Bitten, Howling Moon, Lone Warrior, and Wolf Among Sheep. And of course, things like Once Bitten and Howling Moon, where you get multiple werewolves, they're going to get effectively double the buff. So a nice buff here for werewolves. A tanky unit becoming even tankier. Next up, we have a damage increase to the Woodsman. Now, the Woodsman damage is going to go up from 90 to 100. And again, as we spoke before with the Poison Strike, looking at this threshold, suddenly the Woodsman can single shot a lot more things than it could previously. So now it will single shot a Bazooka Scrat, a Flightless Dragon, a Spear Thrower, and a Tantrum Thrower. So there's a lot more sort of mid-range units there, low mid-range units that the Woodsman can now kill in one, which of course means it's going to trade a lot more effectively. Now, the Woodsman also is a card that is, well, this buff is going to be felt in many other cards. So things like the Groggy Woodsman will also get this buff. The Caber Tosser, which is effectively a Woodsman with the Caber mechanic, will also get that. And this is a small little buff to the Adventuring Party. So a nice little buff here for the Woodsman family. Now we're going to look at the rebalances. Now remember, the rebalances are things that are not obviously a nerf or a buff, or if things are changing fairly dramatically. Now, we have Chief Icebreaker Bolf. Now this guy, people haven't really been liking this guy. Now, since he got true damage in a recent patch, people started liking him a little bit more. But he's going to get a change here. So remember, previously he would freeze a target every third attack. That's being changed. His first attack will freeze a target. So that's going to work similar to how a Stun Lancer works. The Stun Lancer's first attack on a target will stun it. Chief Icebreaker Bolf's, his first attack on a target will freeze it. And of course he can freeze multiple things. It's the first attack per target. So if he freezes something, moves on to another target, he will then be able to freeze that again. So he will be able to freeze things on his first attack. Damage, just like the Woodsman, going up from 90 to 100. And the Revelry effect that Bolf had, which really was kind of frustrating to use, where he would drop a frost field, has been removed. Now, Feng the Wanderer has been very strong since the introduction in the previous patch. Remember, Feng is the Zenshi monkey that gets a buff per separate faction within your hand, and the buff you get depends on the faction. So, for example, if you've got Feng in your hand and you've got something like an accursed card, then he will get Spirit. If you've got a Zenshi card, he will get Giant Growth, and so on and so forth. So what some changes have been made here is there were certain situations where if you buffed him with like a Spirit and a Giant Growth, and you gave him Thick Hide from a Stout Heart card, he became very, very tanky and difficult to deal with. So some of the buffs that he's getting are being adjusted here. So the Stout Heart buff, the Thick Hide is being replaced by Slow on attack. I think this is a healthy change. As mentioned, the buffs that I spoke about, the Thick Hide made him very difficult to deal with, very, very tanky with a lot of HP, so that's being removed. This basically means he's going to be better against single target units, where he's going to have the slow, being able to slow their attack down, but he's not going to be so great against Horde, so there should be better ways of dealing with him. Now the Scrat buff is going to be going up from 2 to 3 Scrats, and the Slither buff is going to give him 3.5 seconds of poison per attack, where previously he only had 3 seconds. So the Stout Heart change is definitely a nerf, the Scrat and the Slither definitely a buff. So we'll see if people continue to buff him in the same way, but he's just weaker, or if they try to use different buffs going forward. And again, one of the newer cards, the Rampant Growth. So this is being changed a little bit. So the Rampant Growth is a spell that effectively consumes your Growth Burst Shrooms, and then they will go to the target and they will heal it. So what they're going to do now is very similar to how it was before, but the healing's going to be increased from 50 to 75 per shroom. And they will give Giant Growth to the Zenshi minion. If it's a Zenshi minion, the target, it will get Giant Growth from the shroom, which makes sense if you think about it, because that's normally what a shroom would do. The double healing that used to happen to Zenshi minions has been reduced. So this is being changed a little bit. And there was a bug as well with this where it would consume your opponent's Growth Burst Shrooms, as we'll see in the bug fixes. That has been addressed. So Rampant Growth getting some more healing, giving Giant Growth to the Zenshi minions. Because the thing you kind of had, the situation before is you wanted to give Giant Growth to your minions with the Shroom, but you also didn't want to use the Shroom to get the heal from the Rampant Growth. So you were kind of stuck between making a decision of which you wanted to go for. This will allow you to get both benefits from the Shroom. Okay, so now we move on to the nerfs. So with the nerf, we've seen some nerfs to the Brutus and Terror Brutus previously, where they had their self-healing removed. So what we're going to see here is a increase nerf where their health is going to be reduced a little bit further. So Brutus health dropping from 1,000 to 900, Terror Brutus dropping from 2,500 to 2,300. So remember, when the self-healing was removed, they did receive a health increase to kind of make up for that, but that's being reduced now. Now we see a change here to the Arcane Ring, and this is really a change to a specific strat. So the master damage of the Arcane Ring is going down, so 50% master damage effectively. Previously it would do 240 master damage, now it's going to go down to 120 master damage. And this is really a direct nerf to a specific Rammer plus Arcane Ring strat, where you would just throw the Arcane Ring on the Rammer, and then it would do a ton of face damage. So the idea now is the Arcane Ring is better in minion versus minion interactions. Right, next up we see a nerf to the Brother of the Burning Fist, and as we'll see, a number of the Empyrean units are receiving this nerf. So the Brother of the Burning Fist, the damage is going down from 150 to 130. And as we always look with the threshold, this means the Brother can no longer single shot a lot of units. And of course, the fact it can't single shot it means it won't be able to trade so efficiently. So it will no longer one shot an aimbot, annihilator, assassin, cannon roller, drone walker, lady in fray, legionnaires, Malshar, priestess, Stixie, and Rex Walker. So there's a bunch of things that it can no longer single shot. Things like the cannon roller, that's a real problem if it can't hit that in one. You know, normally you could just, if you wanted to, you could spawn it on the cannon roller and it would kill it. Now the cannon roller can prove a real problem to it. And interestingly, because it can no longer single shot the legionnaires, we often see either Once Bidden played on legionnaires, or you've got the Wolf Among Sheep. If you instantly kill one of those legionnaires, then it won't turn into a wolf. But now it can't single shot a full HP legionnaire. It can now no longer instantly deny that wolf. So there's a number of situations there where this small damage reduction is really going to impact the efficiency of this particular card. Now, similarly to the Brother of the Burning Fist, the Brothers of Light are also receiving this nerf, so damage down from 150 to 130. But of course, there's two of them, so it effectively receives the nerf twice. Now, with the Brothers of Light, because there's two of them, similar to how you have two Zealots of the Burning Fist, if you play them both together on a target, they effectively do one big attack, like two instant attacks together. So there's a number of things that the double attack will no longer be able to kill. So things like Azog, Bara, Cursebearer, Demon Warrior, Incubus, Ting, an Undying Skeleton will no longer be able to be double attacked and instantly killed by the Brother. That's assuming there's no Armor of Light proc. If that does explode, then that's going to change things a little bit. But again, another example of the small change here, meaning that they're not going to be able to trade as efficiently as they were previously. And continuing this theme, we've got Caliph Dawnhammer also receiving the same nerf. So a bunch of changes there to the Empyrean, the big Empyrean units. Now Defenso Chopper is going to receive a small nerf, but this is the damage is going to go down from 50 to 35, but this is not the damage that is received from the shock damage when something attacks it. This is its actual melee damage, which isn't something it really relies on too much, but of course any nerf is going to slow it down. And again, there's a number of things that the Defenso Chopper will no longer be able to kill in one hit. Won't be able to kill snipers, won't be able to kill things like the Crystal Arcanist or the Crystal Archer, the Grenadier, Lone Scout, Plasma Marines, or the little skeletons. Now there's some of those are not so important because they're melee units and they will just bounce off the Defenso Chopper's shock. But the ranged units, the fact it can't single shot those is going to make it far more difficult for it to deal with them. So a small change there to the Defenso Chopper. Now we have a nerf to one of the biggest removal spells in the game, the Mountain Shaper. Now this has received a lot of nerfs recently. Now the nerf here is the mana cost is going to go up. So previously we've seen the charge time has been going up and up. Now we're seeing the mana cost go up. See, the thing with the Mountain Shaper is, even at 8 mana, you know, when you're using a spell, you've got to think, am I getting my mana's worth from it? And it's not that difficult to kill 8 mana's worth. So I still expect Mountain Shaper to still be relatively strong, especially in duos, especially in late game. You know, in late game, when you've got a ton of stuff on both lanes, Mountain Shaper can really pay dividends. But it's definitely in a healthier spot where it takes longer to charge, so you can't just use it quickly every cycle, and now it's going to cost more. So I don't think this is the end for Mountain Shaper, but I think it's definitely a healthy change. Now we have a nerf to the Ritual of Servitude. So the Ritual of Servitude was adjusted. Previously it was changed so that it could be used outside of the classic ritual decks, but it proved to be too strong. So now the specification is it has to be the cheapest card in your deck to trigger the 8 or 9 mana minion. So just to clarify, Normally, this gives you a random 6 or 7 mana cost minion. So it's just like an expensive upgraded blind date. But it has a caveat that if this is the cheapest card in your deck, then it will trigger an 8 or 9 mana minion. Previously, the wording was slightly different, where you couldn't have any cards cheaper than it, which meant you could have cards of the same value. So there were 6 mana Ritual of Servitude decks that were very, very strong. Because the wording has changed to be the cheapest card, you can no longer have this 6 mana Ritual deck that's going to trigger the 8 or 9 mana minion. So small change of wording, but a big impact on the specific decks that it can be used in. So you could use a 7 mana Ritual deck and get the buff previously like you could in the 6 mana, but I think the 7 mana Ritual decks will not be anywhere near as strong, especially in solos, as the 6 mana ones. Now we have a small change here to the Scrapyard. So this is a change to the health of the Scrapyard. Previously it had 400 health, that's going down to 300. So that's going to make it a little bit more easy to counter. So a Wheel of Doom will shut it down fully, and things like the Arcane Barrage will need less stacks to kill it. So previously it would have needed 8 stacks, now it only needs 6 stacks. So a few situations where this will be easier for the Scrapyard to be shut down, which I think is healthy, because the Scrapyard, if it's left uncountered, it can get a huge amount of value. So I think it's healthy for it to be in a position where it's quite fragile, but if you survive, you get a lot of value out of it. But of course, you know, you've got to, with these changes, you've got to try to protect your Scrapyard more. So as mentioned, the Wheel of Doom. One thing I see a lot of people doing is they play their Scrapyard without any thought of the Wheel of Doom, even if they know their opponent has the Wheel of Doom. And if you know they've got a Wheel of Doom, or assume they've got a Wheel of Doom, you've got to play it in a way that you've got enough mana and something in your hand to block it, or your teammate has to block it. So I would like to see people just put a bit more thought into how they play it with regards to what their opponent has. And things like the barrage, if you know your opponent has a barrage, when you play it, try to put some horde on it or something like that. Try to soak those barrage hits. Try to just take your play to that next level. Now we have a little change here to Scrats. So this is ground melee units. All ground melee Scrats are going to have an attack cooldown increase from 1 second to 1.1 seconds. That means they attack slower, which means their DPS has gone down. So this is basically a nerf to Horde. One thing to note, you'll see when you look at the cards and it shows you in your card collection which cards have changed, you'll notice that all of the ones with piloted will have changed, and that's because the Scrat that's piloting it has changed. So people might be a little confused. Why have all these cards changed? I can't see what the change is. It's because the piloted Scrat has changed. So that's just a nerf there to Horde. And the next change is similar, a nerf to Horde. This is a nerf to Skeletons. So Skeletons are the little skeletons, like the one you get from Morelia's spellbook. So their attack is going to go, their cooldown is going to go from 2 seconds to 2.2 seconds. Again, they're going to be attacking slower, so their DPS is going down. So this is going to be a nerf to anything that uses the small skeletons. So that's going to be a nerf overall to Morelia, but remember Morelia got a slight buff, as we saw earlier from her spellbook, and that might be a case of just counteracting this nerf for the spellbook, because they didn't feel that that needed to be nerfed. But Accursed decks in general will feel this nerf. Things like the Unholy Ground, Nivea's Breath, Coax the Diplomancer, and specifically the Skeleton Horde will really feel this nerf. And the Skeleton Horde is one of those cards. It's a very good 4 mana card that you can find outside of Accursed decks. Specifically, you find it in things like King Puff decks, because there's a lot of units there to generate those Night Puffs at perk 3. So this is a nerf to a lot of different strategies there, and a lot of different cards. Next up, we have a small nerf to the Zeppelin Bomber, just an HP nerf going down from 80 to 70. So again, this means it's a little bit more fragile. It can be one-shot by a Magma Cannon and a Wizard Puff, whereas previously it could not. And then we have Zip's Zappinator. So nothing's changing to the card apart from the number of copies allowed. So the number of copies allowed is going down from 3 to 2. So this is only going to be affecting duo gameplay because there's no wild cards in solos. So you can only have 2 in your deck, and of course if you and your teammate are both playing them, you can now only have 4 instead of 6. So that's quite a big change to multi-zip strats. Okay, so those are the balance changes. Next up we have the bug fixes. So we'll go through here. Some of the stuff we've covered already. So the AFK bot has been fixed, whereas previously it would take control at the incorrect times. And as we saw before, the AFK bot feature has been re-enabled. Fixed several issues relating to changing resolution and frame rate settings in the settings menu. Frame rate is now controllable again. Fixed an issue where Priestess could stop moving when healing. So remember, the Priestess recently was given her attack back. If she attacks, she shouldn't move. If she heals, she should move. And this should make her obey those rules. Fixed an issue where Morelia could get stuck in the open book animation, which would prevent her from attacking. That's a nice fix. Fixed a UI related issue related to reconnecting with Zip's Zap Tank. So I think this may have been, I've seen screenshots where people reconnected and their cards were completely empty. I believe that might be what this is fixing. Fixed a visual glitch in the interaction between Feng the Wanderer and Spawn of Fury. Removed combustion from the High Five Adventure bucket. Fixed rampant growth stealing enemy shrooms. Fixed a rare issue where Scrat Tunnels would not show up when played. I think that may have been the one we saw in the recent tournament. Fixed Season 18 and Season 19 cards not having the correct season-specific search tags. And finally, added Wrecked to Draft. Now that's a weird one, because Wrecked was originally in Draft and then got removed. I don't think there was any specific reason why he got removed. It was just an oversight, but Wrecked is now back in Draft. And there we have it. Slithery Sacrifices, version 1.39, the third and final expansion for the Kaboom Kingdom. It's dropping Thursday the 1st of September. We're going to have the 2 new cards, the Idol of Sacrifice and Taluk the Vessel. We've got the new skin, Poltergeist Morelia. We've got the new and improved AFK and Disconnection Bot. We've got a bunch of balance changes and a bunch of bug fixes. So we got a lot to look forward to in this new patch. I'm excited. Hopefully you are too. If you're enjoying the content here, if you want to keep up to date on all Minion Masters stuff, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Give this video a thumbs up. Comment if you've got any questions. Let us know what you feel about the changes. What do you feel about the new cards? And I'll look forward to seeing you out there with the new patch in Minion Masters. I'm BadasFish80. Take care of yourself.